Welcome to our masterclass on marijuana. Is it helpful or is it harmful?
Some people ask, why is it illegal? Others ask, why isn't it legal? Well, our question is it helpful or is it harmful? Do you know in the US today, 18% of the adult population has reported that they've used marijuana once in the last 12 months. And 5% of those have a cannabis use disorder or a marijuana use disorder. So the question is, or have you ever wondered, is it helpful or is it harmful? Today we're going to help you answer that question. Welcome to our masterclass to I Have a Voice. My name is Dean Sinceri, and this is my wife, Holly Kim Sinceri.
Hi.
We've been dealing with substance abuse, addiction, working with people who have struggled with drugs and alcohol for over 30 years. And so today we're going to get into this deep dive into marijuana and help you answer the question, is it helpful or is it harmful? Let's look at some facts about marijuana. What is marijuana? Marijuana, or cannabis, is a plant whose bud, stem, and seeds is ingested to get high and also used for medical purposes nowadays. 2, marijuana has over 400 different chemical compounds, and the two most popular ones are THC, which when it's ingested it creates a high, and CBD, which relieves pain and increases sleep. A third fact is that in the US, 6.2 million daily users of marijuana were reported in 2009. 10 years later, in 2019, there are 13.8 daily users of marijuana, an increase of over double. And we can say that that's increased even more since 2019.
Yeah.
Number 4, marijuana has been used to treat conditions such as chronic pain, anxiety, sleep disorders, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, epilepsy, and some other conditions. And the 5th fact about marijuana is that chronic marijuana use leads to dependency, addiction, decreased cognition or your ability to think, decreased memory, decreased reflexive function, and is also related or associated with higher levels of mental health issues, the most serious being anxiety, psychosis, paranoia, and schizophrenia.
It's a lot. When, in the old days, we smoked marijuana just to calm us down and to bring us down. But if it's, causing more anxiety, that's not good because people are thinking that's what they're getting.
Yes, and the question is, why is that happening today?
Yeah. Why is it happening today? It's a good question.
Well, we're going to look at the marijuana of the 1960s, which I referred to as the Woodstock Weed, versus the 2022 high potency marijuana. And we're going to look at the differences between the two, and it'll help you make sense of why we're having some of these side effects today that they were not having back in the 60s and 70s.
Right. We had problems in the 60s and 70s, but not this.
Not quite the same.
No.
So let's look at one of the differences between Woodstock Weed and the 2022 high potency weed. The Woodstock Weed THC levels were anywhere from 3 to 5%. The 2022 high potency weed, the THC levels are between 15 and 25%. 40 to 60% THC levels in vape concentrates. And the edibles can range from 50% to 99%.
The next one is THC associated with, in the Woodstock weed, was mellow, relaxed, increase of appetite, you always wanted to eat, mild cognitive impairment, where thinking was a little off.
Yeah. But you get into the high potency 2022 weed and the THC levels are so high, it's actually creating anxiety. It's associated with paranoia, psychosis, and stronger cognitive impairment. So some of the side effects that people are having today, they didn't have 30 years ago.
No.
That's why some of the baby boomers are like, oh, it's no big deal. My
Right.
child's smoking marijuana. and
Right.
it's
Better
not-
than alcohol. No big deal. But
Listen, you're dealing with a potency that's 3, 4, 5 times stronger. You can take any medication, any drug, and if you increase the potency 3, 4, 5 times, you're going to have side effects that you would never have
exactly.
on lower doses. All right, so number 3, the brain development of anybody continues to age 25.
Right.
And so the less potency weed of the Woodstock weed, the impact on the brain development is a lot less.
Yes.
But today, the high potency marijuana is having an increased impact on brain development because the concentration levels are so much higher. And so the impact on our kids between 15 and 25 are so much more, and we don't even have studies of the impact that it's having. We're only having symptoms, or we're having manifestations that are different than 30 and 40 years ago. As we said, increased anxiety, increased psychotic episodes, which is really scary.
Yeah.
And then the level of people that are susceptible to schizophrenia are having double the amount of manifestations if they chronically smoke marijuana.
Right.
So we know THC affects our brain. And that's one of the main things that any drug does, it affects our brain. And so we just want you to see that these drastic increases in potency levels are doing things today that they were not doing years and years ago. The Woodstock weed of the 1960s was unregulated, and it was really more natural.
Right. And that was the whole thing, is that we're just doing something natural. It's not chemically induced.
Yes. But the high potency weed of today, it's regulated, it's being genetically manipulated. Because of laboratorial advancements, they're able to create the higher potencies of the THC. And the other thing that makes it a bit scary is that it's being backed now by big tobacco.
Well, that's really scary, because in the, years and years ago when they grew tobacco and you rolled your own cigarettes, that was one thing. And then we know what happened when big tobacco, when the big pharmacy companies bought it and they started putting the chemicals in it, and all the big lawsuits and lung cancer and all that. So now we have another addictive modality going on, and we know when something's addictive, there's money behind it because people can't stop. So it's big business. And now who's bought into it? Not the farmers, not the people that do natural, plant derivatives, the herbs and all that. No, big tobacco bought
Big
it.
tobacco.
Big tobacco.
The fifth difference between Woodstock weed of the 60s and high potency is that the Woodstock weed had little to no overdoses. You never heard of people having overdoses on too much marijuana.
Right. We're talking about just some straight up marijuana, no other drugs mixed with it, just straight up marijuana.
Today, the high potency 2022 marijuana, due to high THC levels, in 2019, there were 2,800 people hospitalized and 68 people died due to illegal THC vaping products directly related to the high potency
Right.
of THC.
Yes, and it's not regulated. They saying it's regulated, but you don't really know if you're getting how much percentage of THC you're getting in each thing.
Well, actually, the laws are not regulating the
Exactly.
amounts that can be put in it.
That's
You
what I'm
can
talking
have
about.
the edibles can be up to 99% THC levels.
That's insane.
I know that Colorado right now is trying to pass a law to try to maximize it at 60%. And so there's a lot of debate about that because it's causing so many problems in the state that has basically free reign with marijuana.
Interesting.
Yeah. So let's look at a cannabis use disorder and what that means. Because there's the recreational use, there's the medical use, but if you use on a regular basis, then it crosses over into what we would call dependency or addiction, or today the medical term that they use is a cannabis use disorder. And so what is a cannabis use disorder? And this is directly from the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic tool for medical doctors. It's a problematic pattern of cannabis use, of marijuana use, leading to clinically significant impairment or distress, which basically means the use is relating to a lot of negative consequences in your life.
Yeah.
As manifested by at least 2 of the following occurring within a 12-month period.
Yeah.
So if you have two
of these
of all of these in a 12-month period.
In a 12-month period. You don't have to have them on the same day or the same month. Just 2.
Then you qualify.
Then you qualify.
Then you're in the club.
Yeah, you have joined my club. Welcome to the club.
So what are 2 of the characteristics that you need to look for out of all these? One is if you have increased amounts over time.
Right, where you wanting to smoke more than what you were smoking prior to.
Yes.
So it took you 1 joint, you felt high, and then in 2 or 3 months, that didn't even touch you. Now you need 2 joints to do it.
Yes. 2 is that you have difficulty stopping or lessening your intake. You know that you need to slow down on using, and you're having a hard time do that, and you're continuing to use.
Right, like you have to take drug tests for work if you have marijuana in your bloodstream, because marijuana stays in your bloodstream longer than alcohol. Then what starts to happen is you're having difficulty stopping that, because it's like, no, I need to take that drug test on Monday morning, and I can't stop smoking.
Yeah.
Or I'm not happy about stop smoking.
At least 2 of these. The third is
2.
Unusual amounts of time getting, using, and recovering from marijuana use.
Right. So I'm taking a lot of time to find it. I'm taking a lot of time to use it. And it's taking a longer time for me to recover from it.
4, having consistent cravings. So that basically means when you're not using, your body starts yearning, starts craving, your mind starts being obsessed with wanting more of it, and it's creating cravings in your life.
Yeah.
Next, continued use despite negative consequences.
Yeah, I've lost my job, but that doesn't matter. I haven't stopped. My girlfriend says I'm a bum. I don't want to do anything anymore. I have no motivation. Too bad. Let that go.
You keep using, I'm going to break up with you.
And I keep using.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. This has become my girlfriend, my boyfriend versus that human being.
Yes. Next would be using in high-risk situations. Example would be like driving, operating heavy machinery. Next would be using even though you're aware of the physical and psychological issues involved. You know that your motivation is not as much, you're having a chronic cough, you're having bronchitis issues, and you're continuing to use.
And I was going to say here too, what I've really noticed is having some very suspicious thoughts of people that you love, like thinking that they're against you, thinking that they wanting to hurt you, thinking that they're trying to steal from you. It's like, you're questioning people that love you and have been in your life for a long time. Something like that's another would go in this category.
Yeah. The next would be a building of tolerance levels, which means what?
Well, we need more to get to the same level of high. So if it took 1 joint to get here, now it takes 3 joints to get here. And, my tolerance level goes up, which is very dangerous.
And the other criteria is if you use marijuana to stop going into withdrawal symptoms.
Right.
So you've built up a dependency, and then when you stop, you get real irritated, you start yearning, your dopamine levels are not kicking off right, and you start having cravings. And so you simply use to avoid having withdrawal symptoms. If you have 2 out of any of these that we mentioned, you would be considered to have what we call a cannabis use disorder, or doctors would call that, or marijuana use disorder.
And if you have that, you want to know that, because, one of the reasons why I quit using was because I truly realized that I was being controlled by that drug.
Yeah.
And I don't like being controlled. I don't know about you, but I do not like it. Do I? No, I don't like it. And I don't know anybody, I've never met one human being that says, oh, control me, please. So if you have two or more of these, you are definitely being controlled. You want to take a look at that. But, why would you want to have consequences or lose things because of a chemical?
Yeah. So, what are the withdrawal symptoms of chronic marijuana use? We see the horror stories of opiate withdrawal where the person's balled up in the corner and they're shaking and they have all kinds of symptoms. Well, the difficulty about marijuana use is that the withdrawal symptoms are more subtle. And so you don't see them as serious.
As intense.
It's not as intense.
You become a real A.
Yeah?
Yeah.
A is for apple?
Yeah.
So if you're chronically using marijuana, you become some level of dependency, chronically being a daily basis, regularly using it, and you suddenly stop.
Yeah.
You're going to go through withdrawal symptoms, and the withdrawal symptoms usually last for around 2 weeks, and the first week is most acute. And what are some of those withdrawal symptoms? One is irritability. Yeah, sometimes we can get irritable and it has nothing to do with
marijuana. That's
irritability,
right.
great
Right.
irritability,
Right.
mood swings.
Mood swings, being really happy, and then you get your food, you ordered as they do in today, you get your DoorDash in, and one little thing's not there, and you're just below a top,
Yeah.
You're having this mood swing, it's not that big a deal. They forgot the ketchup. You have some in your refrigerator,
Yeah.
but, just woo!
And like any drug, if you know that marijuana is artificially creating dopamine levels,
Exactly.
and your body gets used to that, then you take the marijuana away and you're no longer creating those dopamine levels.
Exactly.
And your body needs to reset, needs to reboot, and that takes time. So you go through a period of time where that happy feeling is not there.
Right.
Because your dopamine levels have not been rebooted. So that's does create irritability, mood swings. It also, another withdrawal symptom is sleep difficulties.
Right.
It affects your brain. You're not able to sleep as well. Another one is a decreased appetite.
Right, where you're not hungry, you're aggravated. But I was going to go back to the sleep difficulties. So let's just say you were using marijuana to sleep. Okay? You were using, it makes you, mellow and helps you sleep. So you smoke a joint before you go to bed, right? Then you realize, let's just say you got to take a drug test, so you can't do it, okay? And all of a sudden, now you can't sleep at all because you already had a difficulty. Now you've really put yourself in a position where your dopamine levels are off, your serotonins are off, and now you're really having trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
So you've created worse of a problem.
Messing with your brain.
Messing with your brain, yes.
Another characteristic is cravings when you're not using during the withdrawal. Another is restlessness, just not able to relax, irritable.
Nothing really satisfies you.
Yes. And then finally, there's other various forms of physical discomfort that come with the withdrawal. And like I said, they're most acute for the first week and then usually last for about 2 weeks.
Well, and you think about it, like if you were given marijuana to use for pain, well, you're already in pain before. So now you're smoking it and realize now that it's making you paranoid, it's making you not think clear thoughts, and all of a sudden you realize, I got to get off of this. This is not working for me. Now you don't know if the pain's coming from taking the marijuana away from you or if it's the pain that you were having prior to smoking the marijuana. That's one of the big things with opiates.
Yeah.
But, so you really need to detox from it so you can truly measure how much is that pain really hurting you in your leg or your back or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's look at marijuana versus other addictive drugs. As was mentioned before, addiction is measured by an increase in negative consequences over time. So the negative consequences could be in your relationship, it could be in your finances, it could be in legal consequences, job or school consequences if you're a student, health consequences. And I want you to see this graph here. This shows that year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, some drugs, when you take on a regular basis, the consequences are very severe and very quickly, like crack cocaine. In 1 year, 6 months, a person can lose almost everything.
Yeah.
Can lose their family, their jobs, their finances, end up on the streets. Whereas compared to marijuana, the consequences are slower, they're not as intense, and the descent or the increase in negative consequences is like a plane coming in off of a transatlantic flight. It's a slow descent. That's why it's so challenging to identify it as a problem.
Right. But I do think, too, is that with the psychosis, if you have somebody that is not psychotic behavior, like they're not thinking out of their mind, if you're eating those gummies and eating the edibles with the THC level so high,
Yeah.
that psychotic break could happen way before 4 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So
it's a game changer.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
So we're talking about smoking marijuana in the old days. But when you start adding the gummies and you start adding the vapes, especially the gummies with the high potency rate, it's going to be interesting for me to see that these, they're trying to find out why these young men, these young kids are having these mass murders. It would be very interesting to see, are they eating the gummies? Are they having these psychotic breaks? Because
the young brains are not able to handle the high potency THC levels.
Exactly. Not to say they couldn't have been a little bit of a troublemaker or a little have family issues and all that, but we're talking about eating something that is very high potency.
Yeah, well, when you look at the Uvalde incident,
yes,
if the kid was just angry with his school experience, it seemed like the victims would have been the administrators.
Exactly.
And he would have went after the people that he was angry with. But the indication that he went after the 4th grade students was definitely an indication of psychosis.
Exactly. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I want to bring you back to our purpose is to help you understand, is this substance helpful or harmful? I want you to look at this SPECT scan. Dr. Daniel Amen is a psychiatrist that uses SPECT scans to evaluate the brain. And look on the left side, there's the healthy brain, which the lighter colors indicate there's a lot of activity going on in the brain. If it's dark colors, then there's lack of activity. Look at the right. This is a chronic marijuana user who had a SPECT scan, and compare that to the healthy brain. You see all the different spaces, the different holes that have occurred, and just really devastating to this person's brain. And I think in some ways we have no idea the impact of the high potency marijuana is having on our kids. There's not any major studies studying this. There's actually a lack of studies in terms of the impact. And so we need to look at this much closer before we make a decision about whether it's helpful or harmful. So let's make a comparison between the two. We're talking about the marijuana of today.
Yeah, just marijuana, not mixing alcohol, not mixing drugs, cocaine, opiates, none of that. Just straight up marijuana.
And we're talking about the marijuana of today and not the marijuana of the 1960s.
Right, the
Woodstock
marijuana that
Weed.
I use, right.
So is it helpful? Well, 3 reasons why perhaps it's helpful. It's used to treat anxiety medically. It's used to treat chronic pain. They've had some success in treating some instances of post-traumatic stress disorder. It's been helpful in treating some sleep problems. Number 2, it's been helpful stating that it's used for chronic pain and that it's a less addictive, even though it's addictive, a less addictive drug than opiates.
Which in my day, they used to say, I've been sober for 39 years, since January 10th, 1983. And unfortunately, what we used to say is, find a healthy addiction. There is no healthy addiction. So what we're talking about when we say it is less addictive than opiates, which means it's a lot easier to detox from, is really what we're saying here.
And then third, medical marijuana is regulated and monitored by an MD if you're getting it through a doctor. So perhaps that's helpful and a positive thing.
And the other thing too is just because people think if we legalize something that we're not going to be buying it from the black market. That's not true.
Let's look at how it's harmful based on what we've talked about so far. Number one, high potency marijuana is associated with an increase in mental health issues, including anxiety. It's used to treat anxiety, but the high potency actually leads to anxiety in some cases. It also including paranoia, psychosis, which can look like literally having hallucination of things that are not there, having delusions about people and people's motives, and which is interesting. Another thing that they've identified is a loss in personal identity.
Which very interesting. I'm going to go here first with the PTSD. So if you have PTSD from the war and they're giving you marijuana to smoke or access to the gummies, and it's high potency and you're not aware of that, and it can cause hallucinations and psychosis and paranoia, you have just traumatized someone. I mean, that's really scary. And then let's go to loss of...
Yeah, if they're if they're being treated for PTSD, they have to make sure the dosages that they're taking are within the right limits, because you're taking a huge chance, as Holly Kim is saying, is actually exacerbating the problem that you're trying to solve.
And then the other thing is personal identity. I mean, we in a crisis in 2022 about identity, in my opinion. This is my opinion. And you're smoking something or taking something or vaping something that is going to give you a sense of more loss of who you personally are, which allows you to be vulnerable to other people's opinion of who you are. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Number two, THC is associated, or marijuana use, with cognitive impairment, which our ability to think, memory difficulties, and a decreased ability to think in crisis. They did an interesting experiment with airplane pilots. I don't know how they got them to do it, but they simulated situations when they would have a crisis while they're in the cockpit. And then they had them take THC or marijuana and do the same simulations. And they found that when they were high, they were not able to respond effectively to the crisis in which they were before. And so you translate that into driving a car.
Or being on an airplane with a high pilot.
Yeah.
A pilot that's high? Oh, I'm not interested. I'm not afraid to fly, but I'm not interested in being on an airplane with somebody that's high.
Of course. So if it decreases your ability to think in crisis, like for example, another study found that being high in marijuana doubles your chances of being in an automobile accident. Why? Because you're not able to respond quickly to a crisis that's happening, and it would lead to a greater chance of an automobile accident.
You only got to get in one of those, and now you're like, that's how I am. One accident, and I'm like, oh, it's terrible.
So how is the 2022 high potency marijuana harmful? Number three, let's talk about our youth. The brain development of any individual continues to age 25.
That's a fact.
Marijuana, we know, has an impact on brain development. If you increase it to a high potency marijuana, then there's an increased impact on brain development, and it's also been shown to lower IQ scores for chronic marijuana users who are in their late teens and early 20s. And there's also many other unknowns connected to how it impacts our brain because it hasn't been studied enough. Number four, it artificially stimulates dopamine levels just like other drugs, and therefore regular use leads to addiction, to cravings, and withdrawal.
And you know that word artificial, we don't ever really think about that. It's like one of the things that I truly believe most people want, the people that I work with anyway, and the thing that I want is to be authentic. Is I want to be an authentic person. I want to be real about who I am and how I feel, what I see, and what matters to me. And this is something that gives me an artificial stimulant of dopamine. So now what I think that I'm feeling is not really what I'm feeling. It's been artificially mood altered, which, doesn't do very much for the authentic self.
This is true.
Yeah.
Also, how is this high potency marijuana harmful? Number 5 is it's connected to an increased use of other drugs. Mm-hmm. For years it's been said that marijuana is the gateway drug into other drugs.
And then they were saying, oh no.
No, if we legalize it, then it'll decrease it. But what we have found, like Colorado was one of the first states that legalized marijuana. Since marijuana has been legalized in Colorado, opiate use has increased. It hasn't decreased.
Right.
You would think it would be the opposite if it was true that it actually will slow down the use of other drugs. But it's actually increased. And part of the reason why is that once you get addicted to marijuana, you have a deficit in dopamine.
Yeah.
And if you stop using the marijuana, then you're going to try to find another substance to deal with the deficit of dopamine.
Right.
And that could be opiates, that could be cocaine. They all have the same impact to a greater or lesser degree on the dopamine receptors. And number 6, how is high potency marijuana harmful? Well, a big tobacco company, one of these companies just invested $2 billion into the marijuana industry.
Interesting. 2 billion?
2 billion.
Oh. So anything addictive, we know people are going to make money off of it.
And we know our history with the tobacco companies is that they haven't been interested in health consciousness and helping us. Obviously any company's built on the ability to make profit, but there has been massive harm done to people all over the world because of cover-ups and additives and a lot of very unhealthy things. And for big tobacco to say we're going to put $2 billion into this industry just says something.
Well, if they put in $2 billion in, how much are they going to be making?
Yeah. Well.
And then the price of that, what's really the price, is our human beings.
So our question today was, is marijuana of today helpful or harmful? It does have some benefits. It has a lot of harmful effects also. So hopefully our video will help you make a more educated decision about what the impact of marijuana is and cannabis is on you and on the loved ones around you. I want to invite you to these 2 really good resources of marijuana. One is a book simply called Marijuana by Kevin Hill. He's a medical doctor, and it's the unbiased truth about the world's most popular weed. And then also, if you're interested in really moving into a recovery process of coming off of marijuana, getting some support, this book here, Life with Hope, A Return to Living Through the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions of Marijuana Anonymous. An excellent book, lots of stories, fill you with hope, will give you the tools to move into a recovery process that will be life-changing for you. If you're interested in one or both of these books, we have a link for you in the description, and you can get those books today, and they'll be helpful. And secondly, we've identified, like, is it helpful, is it harmful? And perhaps in this video, you're kind of putting together that so-and-so, this loved one, this friend of mine, an associate has an issue with addiction, may have a problem with marijuana, abuse disorder. We would like to help you with that because sometimes you don't know how to interact with somebody that's struggling.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people don't know how to react.
What are the do's and don'ts?
Yeah, because you want to do it right, if possible.
To help them get better, but not to help them get worse.
Right.
So I'd encourage you to check out this video, Addiction, Are You Helping or Hurting? And to check on that right now, just click on the screen, and that'll be very helpful for you. And we will see you
in the next video.